All right, hey, Goon Squad, and welcome back to another edition of the Football Goons podcast. In this week's somewhat short episode, we're going to shake off the dust from the old fantasy brains, and we're going to let you know some of our early thoughts about the 2017 campaign and some things you can be doing right now to get a leg up on the rest of the owners in your league, unless, of course, the rest of your owners in the league are us, which point in time, just find a new league. All right, so we're going to kick things off here real quick. We're just going to kick around some names this week, let you guys know what we're thinking about some old faces in some new places, whether it be rookies, established veterans, kind of older guys hanging on, chasing a ring, and let you know what that means for you as a fantasy owner. So we'll kick things off, really, the aging veterans first. They're trying to stay relevant to the league, and for us, that means just fantasy. So this offseason, we saw a multitude of pretty major names actually switch teams. And we're going to kick it around the room a little bit, get a feel for what we think their roles are going to be in these new situations. Some of the names here, gentlemen, if this was like the 2010 draft, this is basically just the who's who of the first round. And now we're talking about these guys in new cities, uniforms that are going to feel weird. I've got 5 names copied down here. We won't limit that. We won't limit it to that if one of you has another one. But let's start it off with consensus number 1 pick year after year, and Adrian Peterson, running back of the New Orleans Saints. What do you guys think about this Saints backfield situation with Peets, Mark Ingram, and then they draft an Alvin Kamara? Where's Sean Payton going with this whole thing?
I think Sean Payton's going with one of these guys is not going to be on the roster. I mean, come opening day. I know we've been talking about it all day, and the things that we've been hearing out of Philly today. But I don't see any way that this actually plays out where all 3 of them are on the team come opening day. Like, it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like, I honestly, at this point, I would say Ingram's the best of the 3 backs, and he's probably going to be the odd man out if all 3 of them are, you know what I mean? Like, you didn't take Adrian Peterson to not use him. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. I heard the funniest thing ever, like a week ago. It was, experts revisit the 2010 season and give the championship to the Saints based on this year. You know what I mean? Like, right. It's kind of funny to think about it like that, but you didn't sign Adrian Peterson to not use him. You didn't draft Alvin Kamara to not use him. So who's the odd man out?
And it's that running narrative that, we've talked about long before the Football Goons were even in existence, of how much Sean Payton just hates Mark Ingram. Where it's like, you have a guy that's potentially a top 10 back in the league, skill set wise, who fits your offense extremely well. I think I heard earlier, you think of him as this big bruising back, and I heard earlier today he's got like 96 catches the last 2 seasons.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, what else could you want for that offense? And then you're like, yeah, I know that you ran for 1,000 yards on only 200 carries, but we're going to bring in Adrian Peterson and draft a guy who's, that typical receiving back. So, I mean, kind of focus off Ingram for a minute. Whether or not he's there, what do you see Peterson being?
If it's a Peterson Kamara time split come opening day, I think that's actually and I don't even want to say time split, but like if Peterson's the lead back in that offense, healthy, and Kamara is the guy that's going to spell him, I think both of them can be very fantasy relevant. It's the situation that I don't like is if all 3 of them are on the roster, because then it's going to be we're constantly going to be picking the wrong guy every week. You know what I mean? Like, especially for like daily fantasy, if we're talking FanDuel or DraftKings or whatever you play daily, you can't touch any of those guys because you don't know. Yeah, exactly. You have no idea what we're going to be looking at week to week and how Sean Payton decides to use them that week.
It's so weird. I mean, I have no interest at all in having Adrian Peterson, which I've been a long time Adrian Peterson supporter and owner. But in my mind, he's removed from the league at this point. And if Ingram stays, which there's no way they can keep him, right? They just can't. But they have 3 very different backs. And I still think, although Ingram, I agree, is the best one of the 3, he's the odd man out, which is a weird situation. But I just don't see AP carrying the load anymore. And it's not a risk I'm willing to take up. Will I be surprised if he rushes for 2,000? No, I'll be like, yeah, I could see that. But I said it, Miles, 2,000.
I heard it.
But it's a they have 3 really good running backs now. And last year, Breeze threw 41.8 attempts per game. I'm sorry, last year he threw 42 attempts per game. The year before, 41.8 attempts per game. The year before, 41.1 attempts per game. He hasn't had below 40 attempts per game since 2009. What are they doing with 3 good running backs? Like, what are you spending your picks and your money on? It just makes no sense. But that's a different topic for a different day or any other day. But I have no interest in Adrian Peterson regardless.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue into my opinion on this is if Ingram is there, he's still the guy. If I have to own one, he's the one I want.
Yeah.
If he's gone, it actually makes Alvin Kamara like number 1 target crazy for me because I didn't understand the Peterson to the Saints signing at all from day one.
It doesn't make sense at all.
Like he's so far off of what they've been successful with. Like you think Saints air it out, but running backs have been very, very fantasy relevant in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And like Peterson averages like 22 catches a game or something, or a season. You know what I mean? Like he's not a receiving back. He never has been. I'm not sure where they're headed unless, Peyton's going to decide, hey, yeah, I know we've got one of the best all-time downfield passers. We're just going to become a ground and pound. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Stand it. God bless you if you're a Peterson guy and you're going to stick to your guns, but I'm not sure how he's even ownable with or without Ingram.
No.
See, I kind of disagree with you. Not to be that guy, and
good,
I'm not saying
good. You can have him.
It sounds great.
I'm not going to be the guy that drafts Adrian Peterson high if Mark Ingram is gone. But at the same time, if you were going to pick a guy that could run potentially for 1,500 yards as a 31, 32-year-old player, is it not always going to be Adrian Peterson?
Not in New Orleans. With Sean Payton.
But do you think I guess the question is, do you think that Adrian Peterson can be as good from a running standpoint as Mark Ingram?
I was very nervous when Adrian Peterson was talking about going to the Giants because I thought that would be a really good fit.
Yeah.
I just for me, Peterson is absolutely off the field every third down. He's off the field on second and longs.
Especially with Kamara.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's going to be entire series where he doesn't see the field.
Yeah.
Like, this is a guy who
you know what?
He could keep Jerick McKinnon off the field on third downs, and now Kamara is a far better player than that.
Yeah. Let alone
you know what?
It doesn't. Ingram with apparently no desire to trade him.
It really doesn't matter because the Saints had Ingram last year and the year before that, and we're like, this guy needs to be on the field, and yet we get the Tim Hightower show and the cadet show, and you don't like you don't know.
Maybe Sean Payton just likes Adrian Peterson, so he'll play. He'll get 415 carries.
Definitely,
we just don't know. All right, so general consensus, I think Peterson, just for the price, I'm going to let somebody else take him. I think
Rocco.
Yeah,
yes.
Rock will take him.
But that's what I said. I'm not going to be the guy that's like, I'm going to draft AP in the first or second round. And not that I think that that's where his value is, but if Mark Ingram gets traded, we're going to see this skyrocket of Adrian Peterson fantasy draft hype.
Yeah.
So somebody's going to take him higher than he really should go, given that offense. And at the same time, I feel like you could wind up being like, I'm not going to waste it. But at the same time, we could be kicking ourselves if AP has a regular AP year and goes for 1,210. And I don't think that's that out of the stretch.
All right, well, I guess we'll find out there. Let's see if we can move on and get to another player we probably disagree on. I'm going to keep it in the running back. I'm going to keep it in a guy who was in the number 1 overall conversation a few years ago. Denver Bronco running back Jamal Charles. At this point, it's just fun to say the names with the team because it feels like you're playing Madden with a fantasy draft on. But, Jamal Charles hops teams in the AFC West. He goes up to Denver where, they're on the surface, it seems like there's a little bit of a crowded backfield, but, we all in the group like C.J. Anderson a ton, but he just can't stay healthy. And then Devontae Booker, even as a rookie, I understand he's only a rookie, but when given the opportunities last year, he really didn't cash in. So speaking of can't stay healthy, what do you guys think about Jamal Charles?
Pass.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked. So
Color.
you don't want a guy. You don't want a guy who's only going to play 6 games a year. Deal. That's not your draftable players.
6 games. That talk about a sky high ceiling.
Yeah, I really like Jamal Charles.
Yeah.
Color me surprised. Deal doesn't like Jamal Charles. No, like this is one of those. I mean, I feel like this was just I'm gonna spite the Chiefs at this point. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna go to the Broncos. The funny thing about both of these signings, Peterson and Charles, is I would have thought that these guys would have signed on to play for a team with like a more definitive shot at a ring. You know what I mean? Like why the Saints? Why the Broncos? Like the Broncos, obviously the defense is phenomenal, but they're not winning the Super Bowl with Trevor Siemian as their quarterback. It's not happening. I mean, if you guys want to argue that point, we can do that on another. We can do that at another time. But no, it's going to be another backfield by committee type situation in Denver. Anderson's going to be the guy. Charles will spell him. I think Booker really underwhelmed in his rookie season enough that they felt that they could give him another year to develop, get some practice reps, come in the game when necessary. But now you got Anderson and Charles there, and I am no way saying that this is like a 50-50 split here, but Charles gives you a different dynamic that you can use. I don't think he's a top 20 back at this point. I mean, that's kind of silly to say or to think, but
Denver?
On Denver in the AFC West. No, but you know what? This for me, and I said this amongst ourselves last week, it definitely hurts the CJ Anderson value at this point for me, because he is going to be on the field. He's for whatever length of time he can stay healthy. He's going to steal carries. He's going to steal passing attempts. It's going to happen.
I'm putting the over/under at 5. What do you guys got?
I'm actually going to take the over, and here's why. Like he's not the lead back in this situation anymore. He's not going to be getting 25 carries, late in games. He's going to be fresh in the fourth quarter.
You know how many carries it takes him to get hurt? Just one, just a single one.
I think for me, fantasy wise, it's less about Jamal Charles' value, and I agree with Rocky hit on this just before. It's the CJ Anderson value for me. He's a guy that I always want to take as my RB2, and I'd be pretty happy with that. And then there seems to be something like last year when they drafted Booker, I was pretty high on Booker. So I'm like, well, I'm knocking CJ for that. And now, if I'm in a PPR, it kills CJ Anderson because Charles is going to be in there on the passing downs. I'm not worried. Like it's kind of the opposite of the touchdown vulture situation that you're usually scared of. Like Jamal Charles isn't coming in on the 6-yard line. Like that's still going to be CJ time, but it just makes the whole Denver backfield so convoluted. And it's kind of, we hit on New Orleans and now you don't know what to expect week in and week out. Like, are you going to be shocked if all 3 of those guys have a 100-yard game this year at some point? Like it could definitely happen. So just scares me off of CJ Anderson a little bit, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, another running back because, well, Deal and I are here, so we're probably going to talk about running backs.
I like it.
Let's hit on going home, Oakland Raider, Marshawn Lynch. You guys think about beast mode going to the Raiders. This one I love, I got to tell you. I said to you guys, well, earlier today or yesterday, whenever it was, like, I'm going to be the Marshawn Lynch sucker in every league I'm in. Like, I'm going to have him. I'm going to draft him around too early. By week 3, I'm going to be like, why did I draft a 31-year-old running back coming off of taking a year off? But I'm going to do it. I love the guy. I love the situation. I think he's going to be everything we thought Latavius Murray could be, except with actual talent. So I'm kind of high on beast mode.
Listen, I'm not going to beat you to the punch in terms of drafting him. But I couldn't agree with you more, Miles. And I know that doesn't happen very often. So I'm gonna really soak
Seize
this
the
in.
moment here. Seize the moment.
Soak this in. But no, he's 31 years old. But technically in football years, he's 30 because he just, saved a whole year of his life, by not playing last year. he's got a huge benefit of playing behind that massive offensive line, which is no worse than 2A or
Right.
2B. You know what I mean? You got Dallas, Tennessee, and Oakland right now as the top 3 lines in the NFL, and it's really not close. Like those are the top 3, and that's amazing for Marshawn Lynch. And I think the thing that makes me like Lynch the most this year, I think this is the first time that we've ever seen Marshawn Lynch want to play football. And that makes a huge difference. Listen, guy's an absolute monster when he's on the field, but I don't think it was more about paychecks for him in the past. It was, he, not that he doesn't like football, but he goes to Buffalo and who cares? It's Buffalo. You go to Seattle, you're winning championships. It's great, but he's there in the post-game show, with his antics, and he's just Marshawn Lynch. He came out of retirement. He wants to be in Oakland. He wants to play football in Oakland, and he knows that this was his last chance to do so. So that to me really excites me about Lynch, because we could see a different Marshawn Lynch than we've ever seen before. One that cares about what's going on. You know what I mean? Picture beast mode with a little bit more attitude and a little bit more caring. That's scary, So yes, he's 31 years old, but I don't think that's going to come into play as much as people think it is.
Safe to say he won't just be there so he doesn't get fined.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to say I'm intrigued, but honestly, I'm not sure how I feel. He's gotten a break from football, which I think he needed. Will it help him? Will it hurt him? I'm not sure. No reason to really think he can't play anymore. I still think he's a good football player. They have a great line, an excellent pass attempt. So I think that he's a viable option. I haven't put a ton of thought into it because in 3 of my major leagues, the first one I'm in with Miles, the second one I'm in with Miles, and the third one I'm in with a guy with the team name Boast Mode. So I'm probably not going to get him in any of those 3 leagues. So
you don't have to worry about it, basically.
Yeah. So pass.
Pass by not choice.
I think worth mentioning that Joshua Simpson said not everyone has a fat Rob.
This is true. Notice none of these guys went to the Redskins, because why would you go to the Redskins and sit behind Fat Rob? All right, so one more old head that I want to talk about, and I do not want to spend as much time on this knucklehead as the other 3, because number 1, receiver, number 2, Giants. Brandon Marshall just didn't want to sell his house, so he just signed with the Giants. What do you guys think about the fantasy situation here in New York with Odell and Sterling Shepard and now Brandon Marshall?
Brandon Marshall said when he signed with the Jets, New York is going to be my last home. I'll retire before I play anywhere else.
He meant it.
He meant it.
He knew he had 2 shots. I can blow my opportunity twice and not leave.
Hey, technically, I guess he can play for Buffalo too. So
that's true.
He's got one more chance after this.
One more.
Seriously though, Marshall, I think more than anything, I don't think Marshall's value, kind of what we talked about with Jamal Charles and CJ Anderson, but in the reverse. I don't think Marshall's value is really all that high for Marshall. I think Marshall's value really is what Odell's going to be able to do, not seeing double and triple coverage every single time they take a snap. I think that's what they wanted with Sterling Shepard last year, and we saw that in bits and pieces, mainly, the very beginning of the year and the very end of the year, nothing in the middle. I think Marshall's going to be able to open up that offense even more. And really we'll see Odell Beckham in a lot of single coverage, because you have to respect Marshall. You can't, 2 years ago, this guy had 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. So you have to respect him. Yes, he's, 2 years older, but, don't let last year's debacle in a Jets uniform, deter you from thinking that Brandon Marshall can't play football anymore. But I still believe that his value is more in getting the other guys open than it is, putting up solid, productive wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 fantasy numbers.
I actually really like OB Marsh's situation. He seems to defy all odds. He's never had, since his first season, a really bad season. Last year he quietly had 59 receptions, but he had 788 yards and 3 touchdowns on a really bad team. Sorry, Rock, just is what it is. So he
No, you're not getting an argument from me.
So I was talking to Miles a little bit earlier about that he caught 46% of his passes last year, and that's because only 40% of them came in his actual direction. Like he was not getting any balls that were actually to him. So it wasn't really an issue of Brandon Marshall last year. It was an issue of quarterback. And so not great what he had last year, but with what he had to work with, we'll say that it was pretty great. So there's a lot of mouths to feed for the Giants, but there's a lot of food to go around. So I'll say if the situation's right, I'll 100% take him. I think OBJ, Sterling, and Evan Ingram all go before him. So I think you can get him pretty late. And even if it's a depth guy, I think he's a guy to have, at least for me.
See, Deal, like, and I agree with you, like, in the right situation, but isn't Brandon Marshall a guy that, like, if you're playing in a league and you're not one of the 4 goons in this case, isn't Brandon Marshall going to be one of those names that goes way too early because his name is Brandon Marshall? You know what I mean?
So, like, this year. I don't think so.
I think so. I think when you start getting to the later rounds, like we'll say, rounds 10 to 15, like in my mind, Brandon Marshall should be like one of your last picks, like, oh, I'm going to steal this guy and put him on my team just in case. And I think, we're going to get to around 10, 11, 12, and guys are going to be like looking at, the Brandon Marshalls and the J.J. Nelsons of the world.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like, oh, well, I'm going to take Brandon Marshall. How is he still sitting here? I'm going to take Keyshawn Johnson.
So would you take JJ over Brandon Marshall?
I don't know about JJ. I just use that as an example, but there are guys that are going to reach for Brandon Marshall because his name is Brandon Marshall, and I think that, and I'm not just speaking about my league. Every league has that guy who's all about the name, all about the name, and not about the stats. And at this point, like I said, I could be wrong, but he is no better than the 3rd option on that team, probably the 4th, as you said yourself, because Odell is number 1, and I think Sterling's still 2. Brandon Marshall's a nice red zone target, but they also just drafted Evan Ingram.
Yeah,
so it's he's number 3 at best, maybe number 4 option in that offense. In the passing game. I'm not drafting the Giants' 4th wide receiver in the 10th round.
All right, so I think just put a button on that. Safe to say, I won't beat you to Brandon Marshall in any of these leagues.
Which is so funny to me because you loved Brandon Marshall until he became a New York Giant.
Not anymore.
I love it.
All right, so continuing kind of with this topic, let's extend this a little bit to some younger players as well. I mean, we're going to think about either rookies here or younger guys who switch teams, like the Brandon Cooks and the Alshon Jeffries of the fantasy universe. I want to kick around a couple of these names in these brand new situations that either really intrigue you, and then afterwards we'll get one a piece that we're just not going to touch. We're going to avoid it, whether it be we just hate the situation altogether or maybe just the cost it's going to take to draft a player like that. So let's kind of go around round robin style here of a guy in a new situation you really like. So Rock, hit us with who you've got.
I was not sold on this a month ago or when it actually happened, but I think Deal talked me into it. I don't see any way that Brandon Cooks doesn't have a phenomenal year in New England this year. And that breaks my heart to have to say that. But you're playing with the GOAT. It's funny. It sounds weird coming out of my mouth. No, but you're playing.
You didn't have to say it. Like
he says it with so much joy at this point.
Yeah,
too. It's
like you could have just.
I can finally say it.
You didn't have to say it.
It slipped out. No, you're playing with Tom Brady. There's never, as much as we say, oh, there's just too many mouths to feed. Tom Brady never worries about that. You know what I mean? And honestly, I don't think there's too many mouths to feed at this point. There is a cluster at running back right now, and who knows how that's going to shape out and how that's who's going to emerge from that situation. And we could see a different running back every week because that's what Bill Belichick likes to do. But there's never been a shortage of time throwing to number 1 or number 2 wide receivers. And if they're healthy and on the field, it equals a big payday for everybody involved. Now, I'm not saying this is a Randy Moss scenario, but Brandon Cooks is lightning fast. And if Chris Hogan's going to be your stretch the field guy, Brandon Cooks could absolutely be your do-it-all guy on the outside, or use him with his speed in the slot. There's just so many different ways you can use him. So I love the Brandon Cooks to New England signing from a fantasy standpoint. I hate it as a New York Jets fan. I'm going to hate having to play him twice this year. It's going to get ugly in both of those games. But, I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, I will more than likely own Brandon Cooks in most of my leagues.
Let's be honest, it was going to get pretty ugly even if they didn't have Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks didn't push the Patriots ahead of the Jets. It probably didn't happen.
No.
Oh, I'm so excited because more on that in a little bit. So my guy that I like is a rookie. I love Corey Davis in Tennessee. I love the offense as a whole. The line Rock, you hit on it earlier, inarguably one of the top 3 lines in the entire league. Mariota is exciting. He can do great things with the ball. He protects the ball. He puts it near his receivers. He made guys like Rashard Matthews look pretty good last year. And I love the running game to kind of take your attention away from the possibilities of this passing game. The reason I love Corey Davis so much is they took him number 5 overall. There's a reason behind that. And it's not just, we said this kind of last week, maybe they just really wanted him and didn't want to wait till 18. No, you don't take a guy at 5 because you're not sure you can get him later. Like, you take a guy at 5 because you have a specific plan for him. He fits what you want to do. Leading up to the draft, it was like Corey Davis is perfect for the West Coast system. Well, here we are. Welcome to Tennessee. He's the unquestioned number 1 guy in that passing offense. And while, yes, Tennessee does run the ball more than they pass it, you're still talking about a huge target share out of this guy. So I'm not talking about him as being my first receiver or even my second. Honestly, he might even be more of a flex target for me. But as far as when we get into that, people starting to get their third receiver or flex players, he's going to be an absolutely priority grab for me. As far as the rookies go, he's number 1 after you get past those first couple running backs. He's just got the clearest path to targets, and the team sees a major role for him. So Corey Davis is going to be a big target for me. Again, please don't you got Julio Jones, good for you. I got Corey Davis. That's not what I'm trying to drive home here. But he needs to be a priority at your third receiver or flex position. Deal, who you got?
Another Corey. I really love Corey Coleman this year, and he came off a really down year last year, and part of it injury, part of it inconsistency of the team, part of it inconsistency of quarterback, and you can fill in the blank with other excuses, but no need to make excuses because I think this year is the year he really takes off. They lost Terrell Pryor, they lost Gary Barnidge, Andrew Hawkins, and a slew of other guys that actually made a difference last year, and he had a decent year. He had 413 yards, 33 receptions, 3 touchdowns, and he's going to be the guy that really takes over there. Now, I do like their running attack still. I like I've covered before, I don't think either of their running backs are elite. I don't even think they're number 1 running backs, but together as a tandem, I think they're okay. And for what the Browns are, I think they're okay. But I really like him to take over as the number 1 receiver there, fill in kind of that slot where Terrell Pryor was at least. And I really think that Corey Coleman is a much better receiver than Terrell Pryor. So I assume he's going to take over there, and that's what I'm expecting. I expect to have him on a lot of teams because I think he's kind of my takeoff guy this year.
All right, Deal, stay on the mic. Give us a guy in a new situation that you will not be touching.
This is going to hurt. I'm going to give you a kind of a tandem of guys, all right?
Oh, boy. Bonus.
Yeah, bonus features here. This is like the last track of a CD. Remember when there were CDs and you would get that bonus track?
You had to wait like 7 minutes after the last song was over.
Yeah, and sometimes like you would listen to a CD, but you would fall asleep, and then like 17 minutes later, you'd wake up and have a heart attack. What just happened? Demons came out of my speakers. I knew they warned me about this, and it really happened. So I hate Gio and Jeremy Hill's status. I hate Mark Ingram's status. I hate Doug Martin's status. Now, I've been the biggest.
So you hate all your players.
Maybe
are
in
like,
the world, maybe I've been the biggest supporters. I mean, I can add to the list and tell you I most likely won't own Frank the Tank either. Like, all the guys I love, maybe I'll quit playing fantasy football. Maybe this isn't
Seems
my
like
year.
it. Yeah, you might as well just take a year off.
Yeah, if I don't in one of the rounds of the draft in every league I'm in, if I don't get Andrew Luck, I'll probably just delete my team. Like, I really have no reason to live at that point. But those, I'll just touch on the first one with Gio and Jeremy Hill. Gio, I never wanted to own because I never liked him. I love Jeremy Hill, but that situation, we've kind of covered it. It's not good anymore, and so pretty much all those guys I can't see myself owning. So I'm pretty much going to have to just do some research and figure out new guys that I like, I guess. I can't stick with my old faithfuls anymore.
You got to find running backs on other teams, I guess.
I don't care for
they
that.
They are out there.
Yeah, we'll see.
I know those are your boys, but like this is going to be like one of the deepest running backs fantasy seasons I think that we've seen in a long time. I mean, I was going through today. There's like 13 or 14 guys that I would absolutely use like my first or second round pick on. Like that's as deep as I've seen. That's as deep as I've seen it in probably like 5 or 6 years since you had to have a running back number 1 overall.
Right.
So I mean, as much as I feel like as sad as you are right now, you'll get over it pretty quick if you're looking at Dalvin Cook and some of these and Alvin Kamara and some of these young guys come August and September.
We'll see. It's kind of like your grandma dies, but then you have a baby, so it's almost exactly the same situation.
It's kind of like your
horrible scenario.
I can't.
It's kind of like your grandma dies, and then you go to the nursing home and you adopt another grandma.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
It's the same thing.
But like this new grandma,
a younger grandma, a younger grandma,
yeah,
like not an 80-year-old
grandma. Grandma's probably better.
A 60-year-old grandma.
All right.
Yeah.
We're going to stop killing grandmas off. We're going to move on here. To my hate, a player in a new situation that I will not touch because I think it is a horrible fantasy situation is wide receiver from the New England Patriots, Brandon Cooks.
Silly.
You are out of your mind. You're silly.
Listen, Rock, I'm going to take folks, if you just want to rewind to what Rocco said about all the positives and
listen to that
and just hit play, that's all the reasons I don't want to touch him. Like, too many mouths to feed. You just glossed over that. There's a ton of mouths to feed. And here's the thing. Are any of them as talented as Brandon Cooks? No, definitely not. He's absolutely the best receiver on that team. One thing that is important, these guys already have a rapport with Tom Brady. And listen, Tom is as great as it gets at the quarterback position. I'm not doubting his ability to figure out how fast Brandon Cooks is and put the ball where it needs to be. My point is, as long as Tom Brady's been there, which has been sort of a long time, like I was in high school still, and I found white hairs in my beard this week. All right, so it's been a minute. All right, he's only ever forced the ball to one player, and that player was inarguably one of the top 5 receivers of all time in Randy Moss. That's the only player Tom's ever forced the ball to. The second player he's sort of forced it to is Julian Edelman. That's his best friend. And the Patriots offense is not going to just become this chuck it deep to Brandon Cooks kind of thing. You said that they can use Cooks in the slot as their all-around guy. I don't think they will because they don't have to. They already have that in an established place on that team in Julian Edelman. Again, Cooks is a better player. Edelman is perfect for what they want out of that position. For me, all Brandon Cooks is a glorified, albeit very glorified, Malcolm Mitchell. That's what he's going to be in that offense. I think that's the target share he's going to get. Listen, he'll score more than Mitchell did because he's, again, a better player. But I just don't think he's going to be a priority in New England the way that you're going to have to pay up big time to get Cooks because people are going to see, oh, he's a 1,000-yard receiver with the Saints. Now he's just going to the Patriots. He could still do it. Breeze was throwing in the ball like crazy. I just don't think Tom's going to do it. So I still like Edelman to lead that team in targets. I like Gronk if he's there to lead the team in touchdowns. Listen, Cooks is going to be a solid player. He'll put up some decent numbers. I'm just not ready to put in that cost that it's going to take to beat morons like you to him. That's right. I called both of you.
I didn't care for that part of that.
Both of you.
Like
I'm
disliked most of it, and then I hated that part.
I'm sorry. I didn't listen to a word you said after you said Brandon Cooks' name to start this off. So I may have to go back.
Hashtag seventh place. Hashtag seventh place.
Shots fired.
I don't know what that means.
You know exactly what that means. Again, listen, I'm not going to pick. I'm not sitting here saying Cooks is going to bust. You know what I mean?
You are.
I'm saying he's going to bust for the draft capital. Absolutely. You're going to spend on him like in that DeAndre Hopkins, Demaryius Thomas category. And that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to me.
It's really not.
Okay. I said to me, it's ridiculous to me.
Fair enough.
I don't see it. I don't see him being close to those two guys when the season comes done. So, Rock, who do you hate other than me right now?
The guy I hate the most. No, I love this guy. I wanted him to leave. I wanted him to get a fresh start. I just don't foresee it going well for him, unfortunately. The guy that I don't like in this situation is going to be Cheeseburger Eddie Lacy. I know everybody's thinking that he can have a resurgence there. I know everybody's thinking that, maybe he can, leave Green Bay and shed some of the cheese and shed some of the pounds. Listen, that backfield, since Marshawn Lynch has left, that backfield has been pretty average at best. And Eddie Lacy's a guy without top-end speed to hit the hole, even when he was not severely overweight. And he's trimmed down a little bit from his heaviest. He's trimmed down a little bit since his heaviest. I'll give him that. But I think they really like CJ Procise. They use him in so many different ways. Rawls is still hanging around. We don't know what that's going to be. So this is at best a three back, by committee approach in Seattle. And I don't like Eddie Lacy's chances at all as coming out as the top one. So I'm gonna stay away from Cheeseburger Eddie at all costs.
We are gonna hate one another's teams so much. And I think that bodes really well for me.
Not this year.
I feel great about it.
Not this year, actually. We were 1 for 1 on Marshawn Lynch, and now we're 0 for 2. And honestly, I can't believe that you're in favor against Cooks and for Cheeseburger Eddie. Like that, it really surprises me.
It's all a value thing, man. I'm taking Demaryius over Cooks, and I'm taking Eddie Lacy over Duke Johnson. It's a value thing.
You love Duke Johnson.
I do love Duke Johnson.
You're not going to take him over Duke.
You better not take him over Duke Johnson, because at least Duke Johnson in a PPR is going to give you 50 to 60 catches. Cheeseburger Eddie is going to give you
70 points on the whole season.
Cheeseburger Eddie is going to give you 50 to 60 bites of hamburgers. So,
All right. So, just some thoughts there on who we're kind of high on, who we're down on. Obviously, that's all going to change by August. Today is May 8th. All around the country. Pretty exciting. Our final segment this week, what we kind of want to talk about is, we're arguing over these players, and who knows, by August, I could be preaching how Brandon Cooks is going to win the MVP award. We never know how things can change.
Sounds right.
But that doesn't change that in 3 months when we're drafting, we have to have a solid foundation, solid base. So guys, what I want to kick around here is, what are you doing now to get ready for August? And what can owners out there be researching this early on? We're going to release our way too early rankings here, I believe, next week. And they are what they are. It's kind of fun to look at, but by no means should you put that in a spreadsheet, print it out, and bring it to your draft in August. Everything's going to change. So what kind of things can you research and can you do to get a jump on your competition that can really help August come a little easier for you when you have a final ranking?
What I always like to do at this time of the year, and I do it every single year, and it's helped me tremendously, is I go through every single team and read over and research what they added and what they lost, and then how that bodes for every position. So if in a case of quarterback, what receivers did they add or did they lose? What offensive linemen did they add or lose? But also a big thing with quarterbacks, I like, and actually with receivers and running backs, I like to see is what's the defense look like now as opposed to last year. I think that's something that a lot of people skip out on, even when you read an article of what did teams add and lose that's fantasy relevant. Because if you see a team that lost tons of defensive players and they had a decent defense, or even if they had a bad defense last year and they lost a bunch of guys and it doesn't seem like they really rebuilt, well, now they might be throwing the ball a lot more. It might hurt the running back's chances of running because they're not going to have the ball as much and they're going to be behind a lot more. And it's going to go great for the quarterback in a situation with like the Colts, for instance, when their defense doesn't get better and doesn't get better, well, they got to throw more. With the Saints, we can keep relying on Drew Brees to throw 40 to 45 passes a game because their defense is still terrible and they still play in a good division. So they're still going to be losing by about 60 points every game. So you're going to keep having to pass the ball. And even those quarterbacks that we joke about, like the Blake Bortles and the Carson Palmer and the Joe Flacco, well, the reason they're throwing the ball so much is because they're down. Now, they're not a great quarterback to have on your real team, but as far as fantasy goes, they're going to put up some points because they're going to be having to throw the ball. So what I really like to do is just go through the teams and what did they add, what did they lose, and how does that affect everybody that's fantasy relevant.
Yeah, if you're only a fantasy player in 2015 and you don't pay attention to the league, there's no way you could convince somebody that owned Bortles and Allen Robinson that the Jags weren't a Super Bowl contender.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because those two guys exploded. So that's a pretty good one.
Is that another shot? Is that another shot at me?
Why not? Why not at this point?
In the dark, but it was a shot, I think.
Hey, listeners, I drafted Blake Bortles and Allen Robinson too high. Okay? Miles is going to say it anyway, so I might as well just tell you out front. Thank you for that.
You know what? I got to shoot straight. That was not my intention at all, but I'm okay with you having to admit
it. Still funny.
Sure it was. It absolutely was. No, one, I love doing these rankings this early because it gives you such a solid foundation to start with so that you're not like obviously, like Miles said, this is not going to stay the same, all throughout the year. Miles and I were talking before because I have the Eagles backfield pretty low right now. And a lot of that is my personal opinions on what's going to happen in Philadelphia, right? Leading up to the draft. But obviously, if nothing changes, I'm going to have to readjust that because one of those backs is going to take the lead, which right now we don't know where it is. So yeah, as of right now, I got, all three of the Philadelphia backs, almost undraftable for me. But things change between now and August. But I think my favorite thing to do at this point, and this may be kind of hard to do if you don't have the type of group that we have where we're constantly talking to each other throughout the year, not just, during the fantasy season, but all season long. But I like to listen to everybody in my fantasy group, find out what they like, what they don't like, know the guys that you're going to be playing against every week. Because, that could be the difference of when do you have to take certain players based on, what the other guys in your league, one, think of them, or two, we joke around all the time. I know that South is never drafting a Dallas Cowboy. So I don't have to worry about, if South picks right after me and, we're about to hit the turn, I don't have to worry about taking Dez Bryant or, maybe Ezekiel Elliott is different, but he's probably still worried about the rookie wall next year for Zeke. So, but realistically, know the guys in your league, know what they like, know what they don't like. If I know a guy like Deal is running back crazy. So if Deal's drafting right after me, I can't pass on the running back because he won't make it back to me. You know what I mean? So it's all about knowing the guys that you play with and knowing the guys that are going to be drafting, next to you, around you. That's my favorite thing to do. And that's honestly, that's made a world of difference for me. I know #7th place, but I think the last 2 years I've done much, much better in terms of drafting teams.
Yeah.
As opposed to prior years, just by paying attention to what's going on around me and not just saying, okay, well, I like this guy, I like this guy, I like this guy, and saying, okay, I like this guy, but he's not going to go for another 3 rounds, and he's definitely not going to go to the next guy that's picking after me because he hates the Jaguars or he hates the Cowboys, So I think that's really important. It's more than just knowing what you want, but knowing what the other guys want too.
Yep.
You actually like doing, I'm glad you said you like doing the way too early rankings because, doing a true big board and true positional rankings, it's a massive undertaking. And I fully understand why most people, and I don't even say most people as far as like, oh, lazy owners. I mean, most people just buy a magazine or download a cheat sheet from a site that they trust and like roll with it, and maybe on the fly adjust it a little bit because it is difficult to take a list of, 100 receivers and whittle it down and make tiers and it's huge. But to do it now and even spend like a lazy amount of time on it, it just gives you a thought a few months early of what do I kind of think about this player as a whole. You're not making the critical decision of, which of these two guys am I going to draft when it comes down to it. Like you're able to look at this ranking and tier these players. And I'm able to sit here and say, listen, I love Brandon Cooks. I think he's a great addition to the Patriots. I think he's going to put up some numbers, but I don't have to like crazy research him because I'm not going to own him because I have him in with other players that I prefer. Right. So it's it gives you a loose idea of what you think, which is really what, if you've listened to our podcast last summer and what you'll hear again, undoubtedly is this is your fantasy team. No matter whose rankings you're using, they're not right for your team. So you have to get a feel for, how do I feel about this situation? And just because, Matthew Berry ranks him 8th and I like the guy 9th better, don't take 8, get your feel for the player. So it's kind of fun to go through it now and get a loose idea on, is Fat Rob your guy? Clearly we have one listener who that's their guy, but it gives you an idea of players you like or don't like. The one other thing I'll say that I've kind of got a big nerd project going of a usage study, and I'm kicking around the idea of posting it, even though I did all the work and let you guys see it, if we could post it up on the site, but just what each team did as far as what percentage of the carries went to the first running back, what percentage of the targets went to the first 4 receivers. It gives you an idea of these players' usage tree where you get a situation like the 2015 Jets where it was like basically every pass went to either Brandon Marshall or Eric Decker. So like even if they weren't as talented as some other guys, they got double the targets as everyone every week. Or you get a situation, like New England, I think is going to be this year where you got like 7 guys sharing the receptions.
Right.
So it kind of gives you an idea of what to expect. Basically, my suggestion to anybody out there is right now just do big overarching umbrella kind of things. Get an idea of what teams are going to be doing, what kind of schemes they run, how many targets they have to go around, and can't be bad for you in the long run. Nothing too specific now, though, because everything can change. If we did this podcast tomorrow night, we could be talking about Mark Ingram of the Philadelphia Eagles. You never know.
You hope so.
Yeah, I do hope so. All right. So, guys, that's going to do it for this edition here, Football Goons podcast. I hope you really enjoyed the discussion. I'm so excited that we're into fantasy land, at least a little bit. I know we're months off from it being relevant, but it's really where our hearts are pretty big time. So what we need from you guys as listeners, get active for us again on social media. We can't see any way we shouldn't be your go-to destination by the time August rolls around. And by your go-to destination, we mean the nation. So ask away, share our responses, help us change the industry by people finding out who we are. We're going to have, like I said, our first group of positional rankings released in the coming week. And we're going to be breaking down these in upcoming podcasts. We've also got a few fun arguments locked and loaded for the coming weeks, kind of to get the doldrums of May and June out of the way before we can really get down to business. So make sure you keep tuning into us, get your daily dose of the greatest game on earth from the Football Goons. As always, you can find us on footballgoons.com, facebook.com/footballgoons, and on the Twitter @footballgoons. And make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Catch notifications of us when we're going live. And as always, we'll catch you next time.